In this video, this is going to be part of a new sort of playlist I have, talking about quotes and themes from books and having sort of like a more laid back conversation about some of the themes and quotes from books that I've recently read. So definitely check out that playlist. This will be the first or the second video in that. And today we're going to be sort of talking just pretty casually, just I guess what I say, spitballing, just some rough thoughts about quotes and things from this book I read recently, The Inevitability of Patriarchy by Stephen Goldberg, this 1977 released sociology and anthropology book. And there were some quotes I wanted to go over. I did a dedicated book review, and that's another video, so you can watch that. This is more of a casual conversation. Anyway, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe while you're here, and to consider becoming a Patreon. The link is in the description. Let's get into it. The first thing I really want to talk about here, and I'll be relating these to like everyday life and going on tangents and whatnot. So this is super rough, just super chill, whatever. The first thing I've got here is this quote here, which was quite something. The question we are dealing with is why no society or group anywhere ever associates authority with a female when an equivalent male is available. I have never thought about this until I saw this quote, and it got me thinking about a few things. Mainly a very stereotypical, very cliche family thing. When like kids are misbehaving, and then the mum is like, she isn't gonna even bother with them in that moment. She just says, wait till your dad gets home. And that puts the fear of God in like the kids. And the mum's like, I've done my best. I've washed my hands. Your father will deal with you when he gets back. And so I think there is something to this question as to what it is that, why males are sort of like associated with authority. A lot to do with strength, I'm sure. And I know there's like certain weird sort of physiological, neurological things in terms of like hearing a man's voice compared to a woman's voice, like the octaves and just the deepness of it and whatnot, and how people just stand to attention more likely to. That I remember just reading that. I'm not sure if that's one of those sort of like random things that actually may not be true, but I remember reading something about that. Not like in the book or anything, but more like on social media. So I really don't know if it's true. I think maybe it might have been a YouTube video. But why do we equate it with males? And I think that's a good question. And I think, again, this is why I read books, because it's like, yeah, actually, why do we? That's quite strange. It is quite strange. Let me know what you guys think. Second one I got here is that the ethnographers found a number of societies in which males did not know of their biological importance, yet these societies were as patriarchal as all others. This demonstrates beyond question that knowledge of paternity has nothing to do with patriarchy. This was an interesting quote for me, because we can get like very bogged down on the strength aspect of men and that difference. But when I've read like other anthropology books, I've seen the theory that basically the human default, the societal human default, is a matriarchy, and that when men learn of, obviously we've been primitive from way back, right? And then when males learn that, when you have sex and after 9 months, then the baby, is actually yours or whatever, or, you can determine these things, then institutions were put in place once males knew that, they wanted to hand their legacy off to their offspring. So that's been quite a popular theory. And I read a book, I think it was in this book I read, The Myth of the Matriarchal Past. It was by this feminist in the late 20th century. I'll put a picture of it up. And she was also talking about this too. and I've seen it mentioned a few times here and there. Yeah, and so this is interesting because if this is true, right, and there are societies that don't know, that the men don't know their biological importance and don't know where children come from, and it's still this sort of feminine mystique and it's still magic to them, but yet they're still patriarchal. That means that kind of expands the conversation. I won't say it like dispels anything or demonstrates beyond question about anything. I don't agree with Goldberg's word in there, but I do think it really does expand the question. It adds more questions than answers as to what the natural default is. So that was quite interesting. Third point I got here. Second, male roles, whatever they are in a given society, are not given high status because they are male roles. Males occupy the roles because the high status motivates the male more strongly, with the result that society comes to associate such roles with males. This is somewhat true. Definitely somewhat true. I think we start getting into the weeds here, rightly so, when we talk about how when we've seen sectors that have changed hands from feminine to masculine, and why that happened mainly in the 20th century, it was because of the world wars, and even like teaching how that went from masculine to feminine, and then you got something like IT and technology that went from feminine to masculine. I think those there is something there when these things swap, and they go back and forth, and then the salad changes. It depresses when it goes to the feminine, and it elevates when it goes to the masculine. And then you got the conversation, rightfully conversation, about how unfair that is and whatnot. And also in terms of Britain's case, when we had actually a promising sort of technology sector, when it went to the masculine, we didn't, again, because Britain just has issues, we didn't really capitalize greatly on that. We don't have a booming tech industry like that, to be honest with you. But I will say this about status. Status is a big theme, and status is a big thing. And I think the reason why it motivates males is because and why it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that it's kind of wasted on women, because like guys genuinely don't care. We genuinely do not care about the status, like high status women like that, like the way women care about high status men. And I think that's a big one. We start getting into sexual desires, and I want to speaking about that. That's one of the things that I kind of like when I'm reading things and I'm kind of just taking a look at society and whatnot. That's one of the things I kind of wish people talked more about, is that our sexual desires and wants that we want in our mates, and even in our pool of mates. So as a straight guy, what I want to see in women, and what straight women want to see in guys. Even if we get rid of all other things, biases and discrimination and etc., I think the sexual desire part is going to be the last thing that's going to absolutely block everything. And I don't think we've come to realize that, and we don't take it seriously. And it's kind of wild, And I won't lie to you, it's a lot of, I think, when we talk about the battle of the sexes, right? I think people's sexual desires and wants actually what stand in the way of any sort of egalitarianism. And I think it is actually a very big foundation, a very big obstacle in the gender wars, in the sex wars, because we've seen it now with women sort of like coming into the workforce, being able to earn a lot more. Their mentality isn't, generally isn't, I will marry, the working class, the lower working class, the guy in the precarious class. It's not usually that, even though we've seen it numerous times. And I think because as well, there's a lack of positive representation about those relationships. And I mean that in the terms of high earning celebrity women dating normal guys and it going horribly wrong. You know, this recently, you know, there's talk about, you know, Keke Palmer, Halle Berry just hasn't had any luck with it. And there's numerous examples. People, especially those who sort of like take their cues and their examples and their archetypes from celebrity relationships, will look at that and they're like, yeah, I'm not applying it to the everyday guy. If you're an everyday girl who kind of like, you know, is a fan of those sort of relationships. So we have a huge status problem. We have a huge status problem. And I think the biggest thing is that essentially you have to tread on people's freedoms if you want to sort of curtail status. I think it's quite a wild thing, especially when it comes to, and here's the thing as well, like status is a bit weird even outside of money, because let's take for example, let's take a more sort of like even demonic example. The T app recently that you know went viral in 2025 about you know, for those who don't know, I'm sure everyone knows, you know the app that it was a women's only app and they could come and like warn other women about abusive men, violent men, unhygienic men also. But then and like that was the core element of it. It was like in England we call these CRBs. CRBs used to be the old name for checks you do if you want to work with kids. You do a CRB check. They're called DBS checks now. But like in, I guess, sort of like urban culture, black culture, a CRB is the check you do on your partner when you ask around about a certain person and who they've been with, what they've done, what they're like. That's a CRB when people mention that in the UK. And so the T app was a CRB. It was a form of doing a CRB on a person, right? But we all saw the stories about and the screenshots about women who were going on there, who were seeing all these red flags on these men about them being abusive, having all sorts of STIs, not looking after their kids, not looking after their women, and then women assigning status to that man and then chasing that man and asking for his IG and thirsting over that man. So status is quite a weird one. It is extremely fucked up. And those men, those sort of like super bummy, just horrible men, like honorable, they don't have any honor. They know that they have some sort of high status, and so they just keep on going. They don't care because they know that there's a certain, within a certain subsection of the population, what they're doing and their supposed flaws and vile behavior actually elevates their status among a big pool of women that they just keep on doing what they're doing. It's we don't talk about status enough and how status operates within all the different sub cultures. It's a weird thing. It is definitely a weird thing. Next quote here. Only a society which completely segregated males and females, had no values of any kind, and lacked hierarchies altogether, could override the advantage given to males by their gender dominance tendency. This is interesting because I'm reading this book right now called Partial Visions: Feminism and Utopianism in the 1970s by Angelica Bama. This is a great book, by the way. I'm just over halfway through. Great book. Fantastic book. And it's crazy because obviously I read this before, that. And what Bama is doing in that book is that she's going over the sort of intersection of feminism and utopianism, and she's doing it through sci-fi. Partially anyway. She's analyzing a lot of female sci-fi books, including one that I have here that I've seen. Where is it? No, too far. I have it. Where is it? The Female Man by Joanna Russ, who was a prominent feminist. And when Balmer's been analysing these stories, one of the things that's been standing out to me is that a lot of them, when these feminists were writing their utopias, they didn't have any men in them. It's either the men had killed themselves off or there's some sort of genocide that happens. Either way, for some reason, somehow, in these utopias that have a lot of common themes that were written in the 19th, 20th century, there were no men. It was just a woman's only world. Even I got here, Sheri Tepper, The Gate to Women's Country. Again, it's all about women that have their own land, their own planet, their own world, and then they live how they want. And you know, because obviously they got to show it in like it's a utopia, it's a supposed utopia, so obviously it's like everything's great, you know. Also have another book that's behind this shelf, A Door into Ocean by Joan Slonczewski or something like that. That's all about this women on the planet that are pacifists and they can like reproduce their own children. There's no males. So yeah, anytime, you know, I guess, again, I mentioned this in my review of the Inevitability of Patriarchy, that there's a lot that the feminists and like anti-feminists actually do overlap on. And in this case, it's the fact that it seems as though feminists think that, at least in their utopian writing, that for them to really, you know, live the way they want to live and have all the power, essentially, they can't be men. And I kind of agree with this statement that there is something, and Goldberg mentions it in his book here, that there is something that just the dominance tendency of men is ends up just taking over. And even if you like bring it to like real life examples, a lot of women don't like even having a single guy in their space because they realize because that guy takes up space. And that's the thing about taking up space. I think what that essentially means is the dominance tendency. It's for men to just really like tell it how it is, tell you know, dictate things, and you know, whether people do what they want to do is another thing, but people don't even like that, you know, they get the opportunity to do so. So it's, and again, this is just another thing we don't talk about in society, is the dominance tendency. And then we don't talk about it in any sort of like productive way. It's always just talked about in sort of mansplaining or however weird thing they want to wrap it up in. But a lot of the times, even if it's just a guy just talking, like there is, and that's why it's a dominance there. It's quite strange. It's quite strange. So I think a lot of people would actually agree with that Goldberg quote this time round, that essentially you'd have to segregate things. But then, as we've seen, segregation kind of isn't the one. It's we've learned, well, I would say we've learned our lesson, but we haven't learned our lesson, but we should have learned our lesson from segregation. So yeah, in terms of the races, you start doing that and it just never ends well. It always just goes pear-shaped. Second from last thing I want to talk about here, second from last quote. My point here is merely that when we look at individuals who attain upper hierarchical positions, nearly always males, we see that physical size and strength is irrelevant while dominance behavior is crucial. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier. Again, I touched on this dominance behavior, and I think a lot of that is related to drive and grit and expectations that are, you know, thrown onto people, particularly men. It's kind of strange that, again, for all the egalitarian equality talk, there's still a responsibility on men. And I know right now, even just the economic times, I think most of the time actually men will have no problem answering that and taking on that responsibility, if I'm being honest with you. Women can like put excess pressure on you, which is true. But I think the thing that really, the main thing, I don't think it's women that really sort of like break men in that regard. I think it's the economy. It's just the, you know what they say, it's the economy stupid. It's the economy. When there's no opportunity, when things just aren't going the way they need to go, whatever lifestyle, whatever method of living you're doing is not feasible. It really isn't. And so, yeah, dominance behavior. Again, mainstream society needs to just be honest and talk about it. Forget red pill, I'm talking an actual analysis of it. How do we actually, like, you can't diminish it. So how do you actually channel it into something productive? Is really how it is. And that's literally the game with young men in particular. You have to channel all that energy. Like, you can, like, I always think this a lot. Young men are like the worst demographic of all demographics to be analysed, in terms of like, we have the capacity to really just tear apart everything, and it doesn't take a lot of us to do it. And as a guy, you feel that as soon as you kind of turn, like, as soon as you sort of enter puberty, you start growing stronger and you start to see the rowdiness, and like, it's very underestimated. You know, I know we've got like shows like Adolescence and it's all fun and games to sort of like poke fun at men and whatever and just do the weird stereotypical analysis. But if you ask boys, and I remember feeling this when I was a boy, like, if you ask boys just how much they're trying to sort of balance themselves, refrain themselves, channel all that energy and extra strength to something good, or just neutralize it, is a lot of work. Especially when you go from like a cute 10-year-old boy to like, literally you could be like in 2-3 years time, like a super dangerous, rebellious teenage boy. It's also kind of weird. And it's also kind of weird when you grow stronger than, I guess, your mum. Like, I like that's a very weird thing. I don't think people have this conversation. Like, I'm from Nigerian like family, right? And so obviously, like, I got beats when I was kids, when you know, I would do something stupid and whatnot. I remember the last time my mum ever hit me, I was about 10, and I remember it not hurting. And I remember being surprised, and I realized then that I was really growing. And I was like, oh. And my mum and I never spoke about it. It's not like my mum's not like a bad person or anything like that, but and I kind of matured as well and stopped doing like the dumb shit that would get me, you know, that would warrant those type of punishments. But I remember when it happened, and I was just like, instead of just crying myself to sleep or something like that, I just got on with my day, and that was that. And I remember that change, like, when you essentially become stronger than like 50% of the population, essentially. Like, it's quite a weird thing in terms of dominance behavior. Because here's the thing as well, and that's sort of the paradox with it that people don't talk about. As a guy, if you don't actually channel that into your family, into your work, your profession, you end up becoming a blight on society. Whereas, like, I don't think it's quite the same for women. If they didn't channel it, like their ability to become a blight on society is a lot more muted. Yes, they might at worst have multiple baby fathers and pop out kids and be on benefits. That's about the worst that can happen. And even then, extremely small percentage of people that do that. Whereas men, there's a way bigger percentage of those who aren't able to sort of channel their masculine into something proper and will end up crumbling any country they want to if there's enough of them. It's quite bizarre. It's quite the paradox people talk about. You have to, if men are to channel their masculine in the correct way, it does lead to dominance behavior and occupying these sort of high status roles. Plus, obviously, you got to average it out. So all roles across every single sort of like occupation you can imagine, right? But at the same time, if you don't channel that masculine, that dominance behavior, and you have sort of like a victim mentality as well, and you're just about roaming the streets, then that's way more detrimental. Way more detrimental, because men need that guidance. Like the strength and the aggression, like that testosterone has to be channeled. And you see it when men don't have that guidance, and when there's actually a dwindling number of people, a small number of people who they respect enough to guide them because they're just so far gone. It's quite nuts. It is quite nuts. Anyway, last quote that I've got here. In every society, a basic male motivation is the feeling that the women and children must be protected. But the feminist cannot have it both ways. If she wishes to sacrifice all this, all that she will get in return is the right to meet men on male terms. She will lose. This was literally the last 2 sentences of the book. And we kind of seen this play out. Again, it goes back to the gender wars I was talking about earlier, in just the complaints, just the myriad of complaints people have, and just the contradictions we're all trying to balance and whatnot. Women complain about there's no chivalry. Everyone's like, well, women kill chivalry, don't want chivalry. Chivalry's not equality. This is an interesting one. Wanting equality and then some is essentially what this is. And then you just got the usual complaints about work and what it's like to just have to be a provider, I have to be the masculine. If every once in a while I see like a video from like lesbians, I didn't know they met masculine lesbian women call themselves masc. Until I saw this video a few days ago, I was just like, okay, it's that's probably what they're called. Anyway, even they're complaining about, I guess, the feminine lesbian women who want to be taken care of, but at the same time, because the masculine lesbian woman is a woman, she doesn't have that sort of male authority. And so I remember this masculine woman was saying that it's hard because essentially you have to be masculine without the authority that men kind of have. And again, it was just a random TikTok. I think I was watching a reaction channel really, and they were reacting themselves to this TikTok. And even those sort of like complaints lend itself a lot to what Goldberg was actually talking about in this book. I have my problems with this book. It's I talk about it in the review, and I do have a Goodreads review. I have Goodreads review for about everything I read essentially. But it's interesting times for sure. That's yeah. And you see a lot of the women losing, essentially in terms of like they're in that masculine world, doing masculine roles, and then they get too old to have children and whatnot. It's all quite. But at the same time, you got to survive. And if you're a woman and you have a natural aptitude for these high status roles, tech, law, medicine, whatever, even just senior management, leadership, executive positions in like a corporate environment, then again, you got to fulfill your potential. Really, you got to go for it. And we just and it's unfortunate for women that we just, as a society, we haven't balanced how to get the best out of them, and also, is it about having enough security to have kids? Yeah, enough economic security to have kids, enough of a cultural security, to actually form family units and raise, you know, good law-abiding children. I don't know. Anyway, this video is about half an hour long now, unedited at least. I have been rambling, and I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing in these type of videos. These theme is just a talk. It's just us talking about quotes and themes from books. So yeah, no, I like this. This is actually quite a bit therapeutic. Anyway, let me guys know what you guys think in general, and if you like this type of video as well, I'll keep doing them if you like them. So it was not an issue. But yeah. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.